Pastor Ed here with our weekly devotion for Holy Week. So we started on Sunday by celebrating Palm Sunday slash Sunday of the Passion. And on Thursday, of course, we'll have Maundy Thursday service, Good Friday service, both of them at 7 o'clock. And then our normal service times on Sunday, Easter Day, and hope you can be a part of one or more or all of those. But we're talking about Holy Week, kind of building on the Palm Sunday, Passion Sunday idea. You might want to look at John 12, 12 to 27, to read about John's version of Palm Sunday. And then, of course, our other reading from the reading from this past Sunday was John 19, the second half of 16, verse 16 through verse 22. Well, I once read an interesting article. And what caught my eye was its title, Science Says Works of Fiction Follow One of 6 Plot Types. So intrigued, I read on. Apparently, researchers at the Computational Story Lab at the University of Vermont data mined over 1,700 works of fiction and found that they all followed one of 6 emotional arcs, just 6. And one of the 6, indeed one of the top 3 actually, is the so-called rise and fall story arc. It's sometimes even referred to as the Icarus story, since it's based on that figure in Greek mythology who was able to fly. Remember, using wings made out of feathers and wax, only he flew too close to the sun. His wings subsequently melted, and he then fell into the sea where he drowned. In this particular story arc, of course, life for the hero or protagonist starts out really well. And things keep getting better and better, but eventually everything goes sideways and he or she figuratively crashes and burns. But it's not just in fiction that we find this story arc repeating itself, is it? Because in real life, there are also numerous examples of a rise and fall, whether we're talking about empires or companies or especially individuals. And so, for instance, you can find references to and even books written by the so-called rise and fall of the Roman Empire, or the rise and fall of Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. And what about this story of Enron? Hard to believe it's been about 25 years ago now. Enron was an energy company, you may recall, that reached dramatic heights only to face a sudden and dizzying fall that shook Wall Street to its very core. In fact, the collapse and bankruptcy of Enron also took down with it Arthur Andersen LLP, which had been one of the largest auditing and accounting firms in the entire world at that time. Again, a meteoric rise, then followed by a crashing fall. Then in history, the French Emperor Napoleon was also one example of this rise and fall story arc. His was a rise from humble beginnings to become a great general, eventually the Emperor of France itself, where he dominated European and world affairs for an entire decade, only to then launch an ill-advised invasion of Russia and ultimately face defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, whereupon he was exiled by the British to the island of St. Helena, where he died at the age of only 51. A dramatic rise and dizzying fall. In fact, the word Waterloo itself has come to signify any decisive or crushing defeat. Well, I could go on with historical figures, of course, but closer to home and in recent memory, what about all the celebrities and famous people in our own time that we've seen similarly crash and burn in recent years? Individuals who apparently had it all, and then for whatever reason or reasons, blew it big time. People like Lance Armstrong, for instance, winner of an unprecedented 7 consecutive Tour de France bicycle races, only to have it all taken away when it was revealed that his success was apparently fueled by the use of performance-enhancing drugs. Or actor Mel Gibson. Let's not even bother to go into the specifics, except to say that he was this huge movie star whose reputation and film career was pretty much destroyed by accusations of being an alcoholic, a wife abuser, misogynist, an anti-Semite. Arguably one of the biggest falls from grace in Hollywood history. Or Paula Deen. Do you remember her, the famous celebrity chef? I actually remember visiting her restaurant down in Savannah, Georgia some years ago during her heyday, or trying to at least. You see, the people who were waiting to get into the restaurant were standing in the hot Georgia sun in July, mind you, in a line that wrapped around an entire city block. And then all of a sudden it came to light one day that she had used the N-word on multiple occasions, among other racist behaviors, and her career immediately went bye-bye. And then there's Bill Gates, the co-founder and longtime CEO of Microsoft, still one of the richest men on the planet, once reviled as being ruthless in business. Over the years, he had slowly but surely developed a brand new reputation as a humanitarian and philanthropist, only to have that tarnished by the details that came out about his divorce and also stories about how he had treated female employees over the years. And then, even more recently, it got even worse for him, didn't it? When it was revealed that he had had multiple interactions with Jeffrey Epstein and even showed up in some of the Epstein files that have been released. Once again, an amazing rise and then an equally amazing fall. I guess there really isn't anything new under the sun. By the way, did you know that that phrase actually comes from the Bible, specifically the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes? Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9 reads, "What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun." And so throughout all of history, not just in fiction, there's been a multitude of amazing rises to fame or power, whatever, followed by a multitude of subsequent falls from those very pinnacles of success or achievement. Well, so what does this have to do with Palm Sunday? You might be asking yourselves, well, I'll tell you if it hasn't already occurred to you yet. Since the beginning of the year, we have focused on the Gospel of John, and we've followed the story of one Jesus of Nazareth who during his lifetime experienced his own meteoric rise to popularity and fame and influence. Remember, this is the guy who started out his career by turning water into wine, then went on to teach with unusual power and authority to heal the sick, feed the 5,000, walk on water, restore sight to the blind, even raise his friend Lazarus from the dead. Talk about a resume. His was second to none. No one ever before had done what he had done. To be sure, no one has done it since either. And then it all came to an exciting and memorable climax in Jerusalem during the Passover, the annual celebration of the Israelites' escape from slavery in Egypt. In fact, all four Gospels, including John, record the story of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem at the time of the annual Passover celebration, a sure sign that this event most definitely took place and was considered to be significant. Religious and even nationalistic feelings were likely at an all-time high, a near fever pitch, perhaps. Word of Jesus' deeds and reputation had undoubtedly spread far and wide and had surely preceded him. And so the pilgrim throngs pouring into Jerusalem that week were excited, even hopeful about what might happen next. Is this the time, the moment when God's Messiah would arrive in power to reverse all of their misfortunes, especially the oppression now being experienced under the harsh rule of the Roman Empire? Even further fueling their hopes and dreams was something the prophet Zechariah had once written centuries before. "Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." And as we hear in the Gospels, what happened next? Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it as he entered Jerusalem, fully understanding, mind you, how this would be interpreted by onlookers, thus fulfilling that centuries-old prophecy. And so the great crowd that had come to the festival took palm branches, went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel." Do you think they're at least a little bit excited at the moment? Do you think? Just a moment ago, I mentioned that all four Gospels record Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, just as all four recorded how quickly, in just a matter of days even, everything that had begun with such promise and hope and anticipation then went completely south, and how the one being hailed as a conquering hero on Sunday was being handed over to be crucified on Friday. Obviously, there was treachery and betrayal involved by one of his own disciples, no less. But there was also the backroom politics and plotting by the religious leaders who conspired not only to put Jesus to death, but also to drag the Roman governor Pontius Pilate into their evil plans as well. Jesus, of course, knew exactly what was going on, even though his disciples, as usual, were completely clueless, with the exception of Judas Iscariot, of course. And even though all four Gospels portray the chief priests and other religious leaders as desiring and then actively working to bring about Jesus' death, only John's Gospel actually describes their thought process. You see, the crowd that had witnessed Lazarus being raised from the dead were now testifying to what Jesus had done, we're told. Moreover, as John tells us, it was precisely because they had heard that Jesus had performed this sign that the larger crowd then went out to meet and greet him. And so in response, the Pharisees said to one another, "You see, You can do nothing. Look, the world has gone after him. In other words, there was real concern, even fear, on their part. And if anything, it forced their hand, pushed up their timetable. Jesus had to be dealt with now, once and for all. And Pilate, for his part, as we've seen, wasn't very interested in putting Jesus to death at first. I find no case against him, he kept repeating. But the religious leaders kept up the pressure. Not only had Jesus committed blasphemy according to their tradition, by purporting to be the Son of God, they even raised the ante by arguing that any claim of his to be a king thereby made him an enemy of Caesar. And if Pilate was to release him, then he himself was no friend of the emperor either. Faced with their relentless arguing and badgering and unwilling to be accused of supporting someone being hailed as a king, he handed Jesus over to be crucified for what were ultimately political reasons, however untrue they really were. And somewhat lost in all this was also the fact that Jerusalem's population during the festival probably swelled anywhere from 3 to perhaps even 6 times its normal size. And therefore the very last thing that Pilate wanted on his hands and on his record was a riot, or even, heaven forbid, a full-out rebellion. And so he really had no choice ultimately except to go along with the religious leaders' plan to discredit and then execute Jesus. And the plan worked to perfection. And so what we have here up until this point at least is the classic rise and fall story arc. Jesus' rise from humble beginnings in Nazareth as a carpenter's son to become the renowned and highly respected teacher and healer, even potential Messiah, was nothing short of amazing. A meteoric rise even, occurring in just 3 short years no less, and culminating in this triumphal entry into Jerusalem during the heightened passions of the Passover. But just days later, Jesus' meteoric rise was followed by an equally dramatic fall, when he was handed over by Pilate, taken to the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha, and there he was crucified. Once again, just as in literature, there was a meteoric rise, then followed by a crashing fall. And the amazing rise, and fall of Jesus of Nazareth. Or was it? You see, in that list of 6 basic story arcs, there's another one as well. In addition to the rise and fall story type, there's also a rise and fall and a rise and fall and rise again story arc. I wonder, could that be the case here as well? Well, I guess you'll just have to come to church on Easter morning in order to find out. Amen. Here's hoping you have a great day and a great whole rest of Holy Week. And again, hope that you are able to take advantage of our worship opportunities on Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, and of course on Easter Sunday. Until then, take care. Bye.